Mr. Chair, we are now live.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Ajax Committee of Adjustment meeting for May 26th, 2021. This meeting of the Committee of Adjustment is being held electronically and live streamed on the internet. Due to the COVID-19 emergency and requirements for physical distancing, no in-person attendance is permitted at this meeting. All regular practices and procedures of the committee continue to apply during this electronic meeting. If we encounter any technical difficulties, we may take a brief recess while they are resolved. Thank you for your patience, and we will now proceed with the meeting. Before moving on to the application portion of this meeting, I would like to confirm whether there are any disclosures of interest from members of committee this evening.
No.
Seeing none, thank you. And if we can look for adoption of the minutes from the previous meeting of April 28th, 2021. Lori, thank you. And do we have a seconder? Mark, seconded by Mark, thank you. All those in favor? Great. Minutes from the previous meeting have been adopted. The committee is bound by the Planning Act to assess each application based upon its ability to meet 4 tests: that the application is minor in nature, is desirable for the appropriate development or use of the lands, and finally is in keeping with the general intent and purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw. The process for tonight's meeting will be conducted in the following manner. The applicant and/or agent will be called upon and at their option may provide a brief description of the minor variance application they have applied for. Committee members may ask questions of the applicant, after which anyone with a direct interest in the application will be given the opportunity to speak either for or against the application. Once a motion is put forward by a committee member, there will be no further input from the applicant or anyone having interest in the application. After a decision is made, notice will be sent out and there will be a 20-day appeal period. Anyone having interest in the application may appeal to the local planning appeals tribunal within 20 days of the decision of the committee. After 20 days, the decision will become final and binding. If a building permit or other approvals are required, they may be filed during the appeal period. However, no building permits will be issued until the appeal period is over and the decision becomes final and binding. A respectful decorum during this evening's proceedings is expected of all present at all times. And beginning with introductions of the committee members, we have Mark Pavlik, Cecil Ramnath, Wasif Ahmed, Lori Roberts, and I'm the chair of the committee, Greg Whitfield. And with us from town staff this evening, we have Carolyn Murphy, planner with the town of Ajax, and Eric Simpson, planner and acting secretary treasurer for the town of Ajax. First application for tonight's meeting is application A7/21 for 513 Poplar Avenue. The variances requested tonight are to permit a minimum front yard setback of 6 meters, where the bylaw requires a minimum front yard setback of 7.62 meters, to permit a maximum lot coverage of 42% or 230 square meters, where the bylaw requires a maximum lot coverage of 33% or 150.96 square meters, to permit a maximum driveway width of 8.8 meters, where the bylaw requires a maximum driveway width of 6.1 meters, and to permit a maximum garage width of 8.8 meters, where the bylaw requires a maximum garage width of 6.1 meters. Eric, was notice served and were any responses received?
Notice was served and no written or oral submissions were received.
Great, thank you. And is the applicant or agent ready, available this evening?
Yes, I am.
Great, thank you. Can you just introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Nicholas Karakolis. I'm the owner of 513 Poplar.
Great, thank you. Town staff have written a report recommending approval of your application subject to 2 conditions. One, that the owner or applicant attain approval of site plan application SP4/21 to the satisfaction of the town, or this decision shall become null and void. And 2, that the owner or applicant obtain all necessary building permits for the proposed detached dwelling from the town's building service section, or this decision shall become null and void. Have you received a copy of the report?
I have, yes.
Great, and do you have any questions or comments on the conditions outlined by staff?
No, I don't.
Great, thank you. If you'd like, now's your opportunity to give us a little bit more detail on your application.
Sure. Ultimately, my wife and I are looking to build our dream home on the property adjacent to where we currently live. And the minor variances that we seek relief for are hopeful to allow us to do that and build the house that we're looking for.
Great, thank you. Do members of committee have any questions for the applicant? Lori?
Thank you, Chair. To the staff, in regards to the staff report for this application, on page 3 of it, the second paragraph says that the proposed dwelling will be the size that is not out of character with the existing neighborhood. There's a lot of different size houses in that particular neighborhood. So when it says it's out of character, are we referring to the newer huge homes that are being built down there, or the older smaller homes?
Through the chair, yeah, it was more so intended towards the newer homes that have been built. There have been various variances in the past that have increased to lot coverages of a similar nature.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions from members of committee? I do have one question for staff. Sorry, Cecil, did you have your hand up?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Question for staff. The staff report references that the 42% coverage is to accommodate a 10, up to a 10 square meter accessory structure in the future if the applicant chooses to do so. Do we have the, I mean, I've got an approximate number here. I just wanted to confirm if we've got that right, and that the lot coverage for the actual house is about 40.2% or 220 square meters. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And now with respect to the conditions, and perhaps this will be up to whoever makes the motion, the approval of the variance for 42% doesn't necessarily tie the coverage variance to limit the house to 40.2% itself. It's just kind of a blanket coverage for 42%, right? So there wouldn't, am I correct in assuming that there would be nothing to prevent them from constructing the house to that full 42%?
Yes, technically you are correct. There's no condition doing that. However, that's a pretty nominal increase. And if they're able to comply with setbacks, then I guess that is something that they could do. But the intent of it was just to give some necessary relief in the future so that they don't have to come back for a future variance in the case that they did want to add a shed.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, are there any further questions from members of committee for the applicant or staff? Yeah, Laurie?
Through you to the staff again, in regards to the question that was just asked. So if it was to be left at 42% and the property was built, the property was built and it was built to 42%, is there anything to stop them from coming back and asking for a second minor variance for a shed or something to that effect?
I think it would be harder to support given the fact that in this report, we've noted that the increase was what went up specifically to accommodate an accessory structure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions from members of committee? Seeing none, I understand we have one participant to speak to the application, Joyce. If now's your opportunity, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and now's your chance to address the committee.
This is Joyce. I don't have any questions.
Okay, great. Just here to sit on the meeting. Okay, in that case, if there's no further questions from members of committee, if we can look for a motion, please. Laurie?
I motion that we approve minor variance A7-21 for 513 Poplar Avenue as it is minor and meets the 4 tests and is subject to the 2 conditions as they are stated.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder on that motion? Oh, Wassef, great. Thank you. Right, and all those in favor? Great, all in favor. Application A7/21 for 513 Poplar Avenue is approved, subject to the 2 conditions in the staff report and the 20-day appeal period. Okay, moving on to our next application this evening. Application A12/21 for 1901 Hardwood Avenue. The variance request this evening is to permit a takeout restaurant use where the bylaw does not permit a takeout restaurant use in the PE zone. Eric, was notice served and were any responses received?
Notice was served and no responses were received.
Great, thank you. And is the applicant with us this evening?
Yes, Mr. Chair, my name is Nadeem Irfan and I architects 10 Miller Business Court, Suite 710, Toronto, Ontario, and 1B3C6.
Great, thank you very much. For the applicant, staff have written a report recommending approval of the application subject to 2 conditions. One, that the takeout restaurant only be permitted to operate from 1901 Hardwood Avenue North, Unit 26, Building B, as illustrated in the staff report, or the decision shall become null and void. And 2, that the owner obtains a building permit for any required interior alterations to the unit, or this decision shall become null and void. Have you received a copy of the staff report?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Great. And do you have any questions or comments on the conditions recommended by staff?
We acknowledge the conditions. We agree to the conditions.
Great, thank you very much. Great, thank you. Do you have anything you'd like to add to provide more detail on the application?
I just wanted to make a small presentation in support of the application. If, as per the bylaw 95/2003, the subject property is zoned for prestige employment, which only permits the dine-in restaurant. If we provide the dine-in restaurant, even for a one chair or one patron, we're required to have 2 washrooms. And there's a hardship on this unit. The width of the unit is approximately 13 feet. By providing the 2 washrooms, this will take approximately 30% of the space of the unit and also 50% of the width of the unit. That will make it very difficult to run the kitchen operations. So that is why we are requesting to convert this into a takeout restaurant. For that reason, we would only be required to provide 1 washroom, which is only for the staff, and will be provided at the back of the unit where the builder or the developer has provided rough-ins. So this will make this work, this takeout restaurant and the business operations. And we believe this is desirable for this unit and appropriate and minor in nature, and we request the committee to take it into consideration for approval.
Great, thank you very much. Do members of the committee have any questions for the applicant? Wassef?
Question for, through the chair to staff. So I didn't actually realize until the applicant just made the presentation that, and, you know, excuse my ignorance, but I thought the takeout restaurant moniker would just kind of go on top of their current dine-in. But if I'm hearing the applicant right, is it more staff that they're no longer going to be considered a dine-in restaurant and will only be a takeout, and that's why the bathroom ratio, etc., is being like foregone? Is that the case? So it's one or the other. You can either be dine-in or takeout.
Through the chair, so it's because the PE zone permits just restaurant, and the way we define just restaurant in the zoning bylaw specifically states that there has to be a dine-in area. We do have a specific definition for takeout restaurant, and it was created through a previous rezoning that allows it. So outside of the one area where it was allowed the one time, we actually don't have the takeout restaurant listed anywhere as a specific use permitted in any zones. So this was kind of a unique situation where the use they were permitting only fit the definition of the takeout restaurant, which isn't specifically listed in the PE zone. So that's why the variance was necessary.
Okay, and then once, if this variance goes through, if the motion goes through, post the appeal period, et cetera, again, through the chair to the staff, sorry, would that then mean that this restaurant will only be considered a takeout restaurant and not a dine-in, and thus getting immunity from the 2 washroom requirement?
So it could still function as just a normal full restaurant. And if that's the case, well, then they would need to make the necessary alterations to get that second washroom because that's a building code requirement. This is just allowing for the ability of a takeout restaurant to also operate since it's not specifically listed as a right use.
So just for clarification, is the current use of the space a restaurant?
The units aren't fully constructed, actually. This building just recently went through site plan approval. So I don't think they're all fully constructed just yet. I think they were kind of built to spec. So the individual unit owners will have to kind of do the interior alterations to bring it up to code.
Laurie?
Thank you. I in my mind, thought it was an existing restaurant and we were trying to add the takeout to it. So just a couple of clarifications and forgive me for this. So this application is asking for the takeout designation, which Eric, you were saying doesn't currently exist in any of the zones. I'm immediately thinking of the Panago restaurant that is at Hardwood and Roslyn. Is that considered a takeout restaurant or is that considered an eat-in as well? If you can picture it.
I can't say I've actually been inside the store to confirm if they have a dining area or not. If they have some sort of a dining area, it would have just fell under restaurant, which is permitted. Typically, this doesn't come up very often because usually most people have some form of a dining area, whether it just be, stool, like in a bar table or some sort. But
that's what this restaurant is like. So this is there no requirement? Again, I always thought that a restaurant, whether it's takeout or not, had to have washroom facilities. So is this almost like a technicality that we're trying to get away with the need to provide a washroom to the public?
From my understanding, yes, that's what it seems like what the applicant's intent is here to do that. And because that then puts it into a different use category or definition, that's why the variance was necessary.
Okay.
Just for clarification, the washroom requirement isn't a zoning requirement, it's a requirement of the Ontario Building Code, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So a restaurant use by definition, I think it was outlined in the staff report, does include incidental takeout as part of the use. It's not the primary use, but as a principal use, a takeout restaurant and the requirements for a takeout restaurant under the Ontario Building Code would only require the single bathroom versus the 2 for a dine-in.
Exactly.
On this size. Okay. Cecil?
Yeah, through the chair. Is there any discretionary type dining that can occur in a takeout style restaurant? I mean, not quite dining in as in the classical sense of the word, where you have a bunch of tables there with people sitting and all that kind of stuff. I'm just thinking whether in a takeout restaurant, people can still have some light dining in a takeout restaurant, or is either or? Because either it's a takeout or it's a dine-in, and cannot be.
So, through the chair, so through the definition, the intent is if it's a takeout restaurant, it's supposed to be off premises for eating and dining in. So if the intent of this unit owner was still to allow people to dine in, then they wouldn't be meeting the building code requirements then.
Yeah, I understand. So I have another question for the chair to staff in that, so that if the applicant or someone wants to convert that takeout restaurant to a dine-in style restaurant, they will have to apply for a new permit. Is that correct?
Correct, because that, I think that's what would trigger the need for the second public washroom.
Yes, okay, thank you.
All right, any further questions from members of committee? Wasif?
One more question through the chair to staff. Eric, and I apologize, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. Do we, I would assume then we do have restaurants like this. There's precedents in Ajax of restaurants that would be just considered takeout only, and then hence to Mr. Chair's point, through Ontario Building Code would only require one bathroom, et cetera, et cetera. So this isn't like, it's not a novel concept.
No, that's correct. And that's why the definition exists. I believe there's only one or two examples, and because they exist, we had to create that definition specifically.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. All right, last time. Any further questions from members of committee? Seeing none, thank you. Is there anyone here to speak either for or against the application? Seeing none, in that case, if we can look for a motion on the application, please. Wasif, I think I saw your hand first.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that the committee approves application A1221 for 1901 Hardwood, Unit 26, Building B, on the basis that it meets the 4 tests, minor in nature, and subject to the 2 conditions as outlined in the staff report.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder on the motion? Cecil, thank you. And all those in favor? Great. All opposed? Great, thank you. So the motion carries 4-1. Application A12/21 for 1901 Hardwood Avenue is approved, subject to the conditions in the staff report and the 20-day appeal period.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Have a good evening. Okay. Moving on to application A17/21 for 63 Hewitt Crescent. The variance requested is to permit uncovered steps leading to a below grade entrance within the southern interior side yard with a setback of 0.35 meters, whereas the bylaw does not permit uncovered steps leading to or from principal building or platform within an interior side yard. Eric, was notice served and were any responses received?
Notice was served and no responses were received.
Thank you. And is the applicant with us this evening?
Yes, I am.
Great, thank you. For the applicant, staff have written a report recommending approval of the application subject to 3 conditions. 1, that the subject variance apply only to the property municipally known as 63 Hewitt Crescent and as shown on the site plan submitted with this application and found as figure 2 within the report, or this decision shall become null and void. 2, that the owner or applicant maintain the historical drainage on the property, or this decision shall become null and void. And 3, that the owner or applicant obtain all necessary building permits from the town's building services section, or this decision shall become null and void. Have you received a copy of the report?
Yes, I have received a copy of the staff report and I agree with the conditions and I don't have any additional comments to add.
Great, thank you. And just for clarification, you were the owner, correct? Carla Jackson?
Yes, I am.
Great, thank you very much. Do members of committee have any questions for the owner? Seeing none, if we can look for a motion on the application then.
So actually, Mr. Chair, question for staff.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Mark.
Just a quick question. What is the background for differentiating between covered steps and uncovered steps? Is it a cosmetic issue or is it a safety issue?
Through the chair, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by the question. Like in what regards?
Well, I understand that the bylaw allows for uncovered or covered steps, but that doesn't allow for uncovered steps, if I'm understanding the application correctly. So
Oh, no, it's just steps in general within the side yard are not permitted to encroach into the setbacks.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. I misunderstood. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Any further questions from anyone? Great, if we can look for a motion, please. Wasif?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that the committee approve application A1721 for 63 Hewitt Crescent on the basis that it meets the 4 tests as minor in nature and subject to the 3 conditions as outlined in the staff report dated May 26, 2021.
Great, thank you. And do we have a seconder on the motion, please? Mark, thank you. Seconded by Mark, and all those in favor? Great, application A17/21 for 63 Hewitt Crescent is approved, subject to the conditions in the staff report and the 20-day appeal period.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
Okay. Move on to our next application for this evening, application A18/21 for 124 Elizabeth Street. The variance requested is to permit a maximum area of 55.4 square meters for a platform or deck more than 1.2 meters in height above finished ground level, where the bylaw requires a maximum area of 30 square meters for a platform or deck more than 1.2 meters in height above finished ground level. Eric was notice served, and aside from the 1 piece of correspondence that we have with us this evening, were any other responses received?
Notice was served and just the 1 correspondence piece.
Great, thank you. Is the applicant and or agent with us this evening?
Hi, good evening. Yes, this is Yvonne Nguyen. I'm the owner and co-applicant for the minor variance application, and the address is 124 Elizabeth Street, as you've stated.
Great, thank you very much. For the applicant, staff have written a report recommending approval of your application, subject to 3 conditions. 1, that the subject variance apply only to the property municipally known as 124 Elizabeth Street, as shown on the site plan submitted with this application and found as figure 2 within the report, or this decision shall become null and void. 2, that the owner or applicant maintain the historical drainage on the property, or this decision shall become null and void. And 3, that the owner or applicant obtain all necessary building permits from the town's building services section, or this decision shall become null and void. For the applicant, have you received a copy of this report?
Yes, I have received a copy of the report. I have no questions or concerns about the conditions.
Great, thank you. Is there any additional detail you'd like to provide us at this time?
No, I just would like to maybe provide a little background as to sort of the old deck that we are essentially replacing with the new deck. The house itself is a property with a walkout basement. So there has been historically a builder deck constructed, which is about just over 20 years old. So it is pretty run down, and we do have young children who is not playing well on a rundown deck with splinters all over. So we are looking to replace that smaller deck structure, same height, but I'm looking to expanding it to what the footprint that was originally there.
Great, thank you. Do members of the committee have any questions for the applicant or staff? Cecil?
Through the chair, question for staff. Is there a precedence in the area where the platform higher than 1.2 meters and greater than 30 square meters in area?
Yeah, through the chair, off the top of my head, I don't recall we've done one specifically within this neighborhood, but over the past few years, we've done numerous platform maximum area increases through variances, so it's not uncommon.
Thank you, and if I may ask another question through the chair to staff. So my second question would be, in submitting this application, is there is there any kind of encroachment or violation thereof of any of the measurements on any side of the property, or is there lots of room?
So the proposed platform complies with all the applicable minimum setbacks. So that would include the interior side yard setback to the adjacent neighbor, which we did receive the concerns and comments from. So it does comply with that. It's also well within the maximum coverage zoning provisions. That's 50% of the yard. It's well under that, I believe at 17%. So the only thing it does not comply with is the maximum 30 square meters, which is only a requirement for platforms that exceed that 1.2 meters in height, which when you have a walkout basement situation, that's inevitable.
But you're well within the 50% allocation.
Correct.
Or, yeah, okay. And if I may ask a follow-up through the chair to staff. So given a situation like this, should the design of the deck itself not be covered in this application, or is this for a later process, or this is it? What we see in front of us is what it is?
Correct. What you see right now is what it is, unless there had to be some small tweak as just as a result of a building code review and trying to get the building permit.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Any further questions for the applicant or staff? Wasif?
Through the chair to the applicant. Did you mention that there's a current existing, you did mention that there is an existing deck there. Did you say it's at the same footprint as today, like the same 55.4 square meters?
Sorry, my apologies. No, the existing deck is at the same height, but smaller in footprint, right?
Okay. And would you happen to know, Madam Applicant, as to what is that current area of the platform?
Yeah. So the current platform, sorry, I don't have the exact measurement, but it's big enough to fit a barbecue and a set of like a wraparound seating, but not big enough to accommodate a dining area, which is essentially what we are looking to do, to be able to have the barbecue, have a sitting and a dining area.
Okay, fair enough. And would you happen to know, would it be half the size of what you're proposing to construct, a quarter the size?
I would say probably between a third to a half of the size. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Any further questions for the applicant or staff? Lori?
Through the chair to staff, I'm not sure if you're able to ask this question, but are you aware, do you know, do the surrounding neighbors, because of the design of the homes in that neighborhood and the way the lots are graded, do they have similar size decks that is being that the applicant is proposing?
So as I had mentioned before, I'm not sure if we've done, like off the top of my head, I'm not sure if we've done a variance in the past to permit these decks increased in area in this specific neighborhood. They would all have the same height though, because of the grade, but some may comply with the 30 square meters and some may be below that. Typically, if it's a builder's grade deck that was built with the home, it would probably be below that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any further questions from members of committee? Seeing none, is there anyone here to speak either for or against the application this evening? Seeing none. If we could look for a motion on the application, please. Cecil?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve application A18214124, Elizabeth Street, as subject to all conditions from staff, as it is minor in nature and meets the 4 test as per the zoning bylaws and official plan. I move to approve.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder on the motion, please? Mark, thank you. And all those in favor? Great, thank you. Application A18/21 for 124 Elizabeth Street is approved, subject to the 3 conditions within the staff report and the 20-day appeal period.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
Moving on to application A19/21 for 2 Kingsford Court. The variances requested are to permit a maximum 20% of the required parking spaces, regardless of tenor, in 2 rows in the front yard of the PE zone, whereas the bylaw outlines that no parking shall be permitted in the front or exterior side yard, except for a maximum of 20% of the required spaces, provided that the spaces in the front or exterior side yard are used exclusively for visitor parking and are arranged in a single row. Also to permit a blended parking rate of 1.41 parking spaces per 100 square meters of gross floor area for sports arena and office uses, where the bylaw requires a minimum of 561 parking spaces for the sports arena and 45 parking spaces for the office use. And finally, to permit a minimum of 1 loading space on the lot, where the bylaw requires a minimum of 2 loading spaces. Eric, was notice served, and were any responses received?
Notice was served, and only the 1 response which was included as an attachment in the report, no letter of support.
Great, thank you. And is the applicant or agent with us this evening?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members, my name is Maury Edelstein from RAI Architect Inc., representing Mr. Nigel Wilson, the owner of the property.
Great, thank you. For the applicant, staff have written a report recommending approval of the application, subject to 2 conditions within the report. 1, that the owner or applicant obtain approval of site plan application SP 11/17 to the satisfaction of the town, or this decision shall become null and void. And 2, that the owner or applicant obtain all necessary building permits from the town's building services section, or this decision shall become null and void. Have you received a copy of the report?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I have to.
Great, and do you have any questions? Great, thank you. And do you have any questions or comments on the conditions outlined by staff?
No.
No.
Great, thank you. Okay, if you'd like to provide any additional detail or background on the application to the committee, now is your opportunity.
We submitted a site plan application in November, and as part of the approval process, zoning compliance is required. So the purpose of the minor variance application is to get approval for these variances and have zoning compliance for our site plan application. The nature of the application, the nature of the building, it's a sports training facility. Mr. Wilson trains little kids on how to play sports, both on the field and off the field. But in the bylaw, there is no particular specific sports training facility defined. We fall under sports arena, which includes bleachers. So the requirement for a sports arena for parking is, the parking requirement for a sports arena, including bleachers, is for this size building is over 600 spaces. But in fact, with the nature of the training falling within business hours on an hourly basis, we're proposing 97 parking spaces, which based on the transportation, based on the parking study that was reviewed by the transportation department, is acceptable. The proposed blended rate of 1.41 spaces per 100 square meters and a resulting 97 spaces is acceptable. That's the main purpose of this application.
Great, thank you. Do members of committee have any questions or comments? Lori?
Thank you very much. Through the chair I'm not sure whether I have a couple questions. The first one, I'm not sure if the applicant or the staff can answer it. The letter supporting the application from 675 Hardwood Holdings. I'm just wondering where they're located and what their relationship is to this application. Is it the same building?
No, we consulted with the neighbors and showed them our proposal. And this letter has been provided by our neighbor to the north.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And to staff, so just based on the applicant's comment, he was saying that there's nothing currently in Ajax that is similar to the type of facility that he has. And I immediately am thinking of the baseball facility that's down, I think it's on Westney South. Would it be similar to that? What is being proposed here?
Hi, my name is Nigel Wilson. I'm the owner of 2 Kingsford Court. Actually, that facility that you're talking about on Wesley Road, I used to own that facility. And I currently own another facility called the Competitive Edge in Ajax. And they're very similar. The only difference is it's just on a bigger scale where I can accommodate more kids. And the facility is strictly for training. It's not for any game purposes. We won't be having any games. It's strictly fundamentals to learn the basics of baseball, soccer, basketball, and just to get the kids more familiar with the understanding of each sports. I think that they have to understand the mental part of the game before they can go ahead and actually play in games. So that's what I am planning to do in this facility.
Okay, so can I clarify that the parking requirements that we're asking for in the new facility in the north, is it similar to the parking requirements that you needed for the facility in the south?
So the facility in the south, it's an industrial unit. So the parking spaces there is I had no say in the parking spaces there. But again, for what I'm doing, the parking spaces it's because I have 3 units and probably have about 30 parking spaces is more than enough, because parents drop off and then they leave and then they come back to pick up their kids. Very seldom would any parent stay in the facility to watch. They just drop off because usually the kids are there for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then they come back and pick up their son or daughter.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Wasif?
Through the chair to the applicant or agent, what's the maximum number of kids at any given point do you foresee in the facility?
Okay, sorry, I didn't know if Maury was going to answer that, but yeah. So I think the number of kids in the facility at one time will probably not exceed more than 50, maybe
Okay.
60 at one time, because like again, like how I was saying that when the kids come in, they get dropped off, and then they're there for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then they leave, and then another set of kids come in. So there's no more than 50 to 60 kids that will come in.
Okay. And what would be your ratio, Mr. Wilson, to instructors to those 60? Would it be like 4 instructors, 6 instructors?
So right now I have 10 employees that are also my coaches. So anytime we have a large group, I always have 10 of my instructors always there at all times.
Okay. All right. And then the last question is, what's your top end age on participants?
Well, currently we have all ages that come in. Like, I mean, I had a 70-year-old come in just because that he was going to a fantasy camp and he wanted to like, you know, to brush up on his skills. So I know. So it ranges from 60 and again, I mean, we had that 7-year-old in just the one time, but if you wanted just to know what the average age that comes in would be ages 6 to about 19.
Okay. The reason I'm asking that question to my fellow committee members and the applicant is really to just understand at any given point how many people could be driving into the facility, and anybody over the age of 18 legally could presumably have a vehicle that they're driving in as well, right? And I get the fact that not every 16, 17-year-old will, but I'm just trying to figure out whether the 97 would be adequate from that perspective. And naturally, you have experience running other facilities. I get that, but I'm just trying to wrestle with that in my head. And if you've got 60 applicants, and if it's a group that's call it 18, 19-year-old, you could have a bunch of people, a bunch of that group that could actually be driving in, plus your coaches, plus your employees, etc. That's what I was trying to figure out. And but it sounds like, at least to me, the 97 should still be sufficient. So.
Yeah, I think having with 97 parking spaces, like there are another facility in the area that has, I think, 80 plus parking spaces. And so again, that is to talk with the traffic study that we did. Mm-hmm. So 97 spaces is adequate for what I'm doing.
We should also mention that we provided carpool spaces, bicycle parking.
Yeah, saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Mark, do you still have a question?
No, it was covered on the previous question.
Great. Cecil?
Yes, through the chair, to the applicant. This is quite exciting what I've been hearing. Now, in regards to the number of sports, the different type of sports that would be trained here, you mentioned about 3 different type of sports, including soccer. What other sports would you be looking at?
So I used to play professional baseball. So baseball is one of them. I have a trainer that played professional soccer, so soccer will be another. And then I also have a professional basketball trainer that again played in the NBA. So, and again, the facility is strictly for skills, strictly for kids to learn the basics of basketball, soccer, and baseball.
So you're not doing anything like karate or taekwondo and things of
No.
that nature?
No.
Thank you.
Any further questions from members of committee? Seeing none. Is there anyone here to speak either for or against the application this evening? Seeing none. In that case, if we can look for a motion on the application, please. Mark?
Yeah, before I do that, I just want to acknowledge that it was nice that the Blue Jays game got rained out tonight, so that the applicant's not missing Alex Manoah's debut in the MLB. But in any case, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we approve application A19/20 for 2 Kingsford Court, subject to the conditions of staff, as the application is minor in nature and meets the other tests.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder on the motion? Wasif, thank you. Seconded by Wasif. All those in favor? Great. Application A19/21 for 2 Kingsford Court is approved, subject to the conditions in the staff report and the 20-day appeal period.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening, gentlemen.
You too.
And Moving on to our final application for this evening, application A20/21 for 585 Finley Avenue. Variances requested are to permit a minimum of 1 loading space on the lot where the bylaw requires 2 loading spaces, and to permit outdoor storage in the south interior side yard where outdoor storage is permitted only in the rear yard and subject to other specific provisions in the GE and HE zones. Eric, was notice served and were any responses received?
Notice was served and no responses were received.
Thank you. And is the applicant with us this evening?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Adam Santos, a planner from Weston Consulting, here tonight representing FinAjax Investments and AutoFix Canada, the owner and applicant of 585 Finley Avenue.
Great, thank you. For the applicant, staff have written a report recommending approval of the application, subject to 2 conditions. 1, that the owner or applicant obtain approval of site plan amendment application SPA 5/21 to the satisfaction of the town, or this decision shall become null and void. And 2, that the owner or applicant obtain all necessary building permits from the town's building services section, or this decision shall become null and void. Have you received a copy of the report?
Yes, we have. We've read planning staff's report. We thank you for their work thus far in the process. We've reviewed the conditions of approval you've just read out. We're in agreement with those findings.
Great, thank you. If you'd like to provide more background to the application, now's your opportunity.
Yeah, certainly, thank you. So to date, we've submitted applications for minor variance, seeking relief to permit outdoor storage in a side yard context. And we've also applied for a reduction of 1 loading space, whereas in the town's bylaw, per a building this size, 2 spaces are required. And I guess the overall context here is the relief has been requested to ultimately facilitate the retrofitting of the existing building to ultimately be used for an auto collision center. Now, if the committee sees benefit, I would be pleased to walk through a bit of a brief presentation, or otherwise I'm here and pleased to answer any questions the committee or members of the public may have.
Yeah, if members of committee have no objections to a brief presentation, I think we can go right ahead with that.
That's great. Let me try sharing my screen here. You can just bear with me here for a moment. All right, Mr. Chair, can you see that from your end?
Yeah, we can.
Excellent. So let's jump right into it. On the screen, you'll see the subject property here outlined in red. It's located on the east side of Finley Avenue, about 100 meters north of the Clement Road intersection. Site's currently vacant. It's been most recently used and occupied by Unistruct Canada. As you'll see by this photo here, true traditional employment uses found this site to the north, the south, the east, and the west. And you'll also see by this photo, there are a bunch of abutting properties which employ the outdoor storage relationship. And this property is generally unique in the sense that the side yard setback as exists today is 41 meters. Generally, that's indicative of a rear yard relationship given its significant depth. Moving along here, this is a copy of our site plan that was submitted through our site plan application, along with our variance application before you here tonight. And of course, it's for the use of an auto collision center. Through planning staff's review of our application for site plan, they've identified the need for 2 variances, which I mentioned a bit earlier. First variance would be for the permissions of 1 minimum loading space. The owners and applicant, they operate dozens of similar type facilities throughout the GTA. Generally, it's their practice to generally employ one loading space. So they're fairly confident that that will service the needs and the demands of their day-to-day business operation. And the second variance is outlined in that southerly rectangle, and that's to permit outdoor storage in that vicinity. In the context of a collision center, this outdoor storage space is going to be used for the, I'll call it, parking of vehicles in need of repair or vehicles which have been recently repaired. Given the existing context of the site, the location of the existing building, the location for this type of function in the side yard as proposed is it's in our mind the most practical location for such functions. And it's also important to note that the extent of the outdoor storage on this site is to be set back 26 meters from the front lot line. So there's clearly a significant amount of separation from the incidental day-to-day activities along Finley Avenue. So just moving along here, the proposed use contemplated for these lands are permitted both in the official plan and in the applicable general employment zone category. Here on the screen is a bit of a snapshot of the town zoning bylaw standards and specific criteria for outdoor storage. The town's bylaw only permits outdoor storage in rear yard relationships subject to this criteria on the screen. And when you have a look at the bylaw, the intent to restrict location of outdoor storage in regard to yards is generally for the purpose of ensuring that these types of storage areas do not dominate and impact the public realm and the streetscape, in this case being Finley Avenue. I'd like to draw your attention to, I'll call it provision D on the screen. This provision is pretty specific in the sense that it requires storage areas to be screened by specific material, being wood, permanent masonry, plastic, and bound by a fence of 1.8 meter high. Moving along here, on the screen, you'll see our landscape plan to the left side of the page, and some details, I'll call it, of fencing and proposed plantings. Green obviously represents sod, that light green being sod, grass area for the site. The green circles you see represent trees, which have deliberately been located along the exterior, or the edges of the site, the edges of the outdoor storage area. And the purpose of that's been to create and foster a bit of a green screen to mitigate viewing impacts of A, Finley Avenue, and B, the abutting parcels. The yellow lines you see on the landscape plan, identified as A, are the proposed 1.8 meter high wooden panel fencing. And you'll see that detail on the right-hand side of the page as well. Through these on-site improvements, the substantive screening, the buffering of the outdoor storage area, it's our opinion, shared with staff, that our application complies with the specific outdoor storage area zoning criteria per the town's bylaw. And in conclusion here tonight, it's our opinion that the minor variance application before you meets the 4 tests for a variance. I would ask that the committee approve the variances as sought here tonight. And this concludes my presentation. Be pleased to answer any questions from members of the public or the committee.
Great, thank you very much. Do members of committee have any questions for the applicant? Lori?
Thank you very much, Chair. To the applicant, just out of curiosity, is this property under construction right now? Is it already being built up?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's my understanding that there is interior construction ongoing. Construction perhaps isn't the term, but interior renos. The owners of the property, they have active building permits working on interior elements of this existing building.
And what about the outside area?
I can speak to this one if you'd like. In terms of the applicant's correct, there are ongoing interior alteration works taking place. In terms of the exterior, those works have taken place absent of site plan approval. Those works have been put to a stop, and the applicant is going through the appropriate channels now to obtain approval for such works.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any further questions from members of committee? Cecil?
Yeah, through the chair, to the applicant. I was wondering, there was mention of storage at this facility, and I wonder whether the applicant could give us a sense of what that storage might look like.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the question. As mentioned, this is an auto collision center. This is a place where folks have damage to their vehicle. They bring it here overnight and they get them repaired. So incidental with those type of uses, and storage area is going to be used for storage of cars that A, are in need of repair, or B, which have been recently repaired. So this is not going to be a case of storing waste materials and that sort of thing. Solely cars.
Correct. So is there any deliberate design that would be included in this space that will not render the storage space as a so-called eyesore? I mean, using a word from the public kind of thing, looking into the facility.
Yeah.
Would you see a mountain of cars kind of thing?
Again, great question through you, Mr. Chair. Do we have the ability to skip to the latter pages of the staff report? Perhaps a staff report page that shows a landscape plan? Yeah, that's great. That's great. So through you, Mr. Chair, this is a copy of our landscape plan, and we've deliberately planted, from what I understand, 40 trees on site. The majority of all trees to be planted have been planted along property edges, and specifically have been planted along the exteriors of the outdoor storage area. We have been working with staff on the detail of this. We will continue to do so. You'll see on the plan in front of us here, there's gates that look to be somewhat open. Those gates are to be of a opaque finish, wooden paneling. So to your point, yes, they will be screened, and continue to work with staff to get them screened to a satisfactory state.
Okay, and do you anticipate any, sorry, through the chair. Thank you very much for the answer to that question, through the chair. My other question would be, in terms of the outdoor storage, would there be a lot of dust that might end up in the space, in the atmosphere? And would that, if that is the case, what's going to be done in order to mitigate the dust component of activity that's going on in that area?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we don't anticipate there being an issue of dust or that sort of manner. From what I understand, all car works are to be done indoors. So the dust and the working on vehicles would be taking place entirely inside. Again, the storage space outside in the side yard is specifically for the storage of vehicles, storage of cars that have been recently repaired, or the storage of cars that are in need of repair. So dust components would be confined to the interior sites.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Any further questions for the applicant? Seeing none, is there anyone here to speak either for or against the application this evening? Seeing none, if we could look for a motion, please. Okay, Wasif.
Mr. Chair, I move to, I put forth the motion to move on approving application A2021 for Finjax Investments Inc. and Fixed Auto Canada Inc. for 585 Finley Avenue on the basis that it is minor in nature, meets the 4 tests, and subject to the 2 conditions as outlined in the staff report.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder on the motion, please? Cecil, thank you. And all those in favor? Great. Application A20/21 for 585 Finley Avenue is approved, subject to the conditions in the staff report and the 20-day appeal period.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Have a good night.
Okay, thank you, you too. And moving on, that concludes the application portion of this evening's meeting. If there's any other business or new business that members of committee or staff would like to discuss. If not, we can look for a motion to adjourn, please. Wasif, thank you. Seconder. Lori, thank you. And all those in favor? Great, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.